If you're planning to walk around Lincoln Park and the Lincoln Park Zoo this summer and the fall, my favorite time to enjoy the city, you'll see plenty of statues with names you'll recognize. Of course, for every Lincoln, there's a Von Schiller. For every Benjamin Franklin, there's a Garibaldi. Today, with the help of author and frequent podcast contributor Connie Fairbanks, we're discussing Lincoln Park's statues, sculptures, and oddities. I'm Tommy Henry, and this is the Chicago History Podcast. Before we get started, I should point out this episode is mainly focused on those statues, sculptures, and oddities in the area bordered roughly from North Avenue to the south, Clark Street to the west, Diversey to the north, and Lake Michigan to the east. There are items of note outside these boundaries that we will likely cover in a future episode. Here's Connie to lead things off.
Jane Byrne, Chicago's first female mayor and the first female mayor of any major American city, served just one term from 1979 to 1983. But during that time, she had two monuments commissioned, the Veterans Monument on the Riverwalk and the Children's Fountain. According to the Chicago Park District website, Byrne played an active role in the Children's Fountain's creation, even selecting some of its sculptural elements, including figures of playful children, musical instruments, and arching cranes in four tiers above a scallop-shaped lower basin made of granite. For the construction of the fountain, city architect Joseph Casserly contracted the Robinson Iron Corporation in Alexander City, Alabama, a firm that purchased 19th century molds and pattern books from earlier manufacturers of fountains as they went out of business. For the children's fountain, Robinson Iron cast 250 small pieces, which were assembled on site at the sculpture's original location in Heald Park on Upper Wacker Drive, just west of Michigan Avenue. Dedicated in October of 1982, the plaque on the fountain included, "Dedicated to all children in Chicago who will take from our past to better our future." Jane Byrne used a photo of herself in front of the fountain on her 1992 memoir, My Chicago. The children's fountain was put into storage under very Chicago circumstances. Sometime during Mayor Richard M. Daley's reign, the statue allegedly developed a leak. And instead of getting immediate repair, it was quickly disassembled and placed in storage. When Wacker Drive reconstruction was completed, the children's fountain was nowhere to be found until press inquiries prompted Chicago officials to respond. The fountain was unearthed, but due to improper storage and lack of maintenance, it needed repair. Damaged and missing pieces were recast using the original molds, and the fountain was reassembled and placed in its new home at the northeast corner of Clark Street and North Avenue in 2005, just to the south of the Chicago History Museum, where it can be enjoyed today.
If you head east down North Avenue, you'll find the Green Vardaman Black, or GV Black, statue at the corner of North Avenue and Astor Street, which honors the man known as the father of modern dentistry. Born in 1836 near Winchester, Illinois, Black revolutionized dental science in the late 19th century. He introduced groundbreaking methods such as the dental drill, techniques for filling cavities still used today, and was one of the first medical professionals to use nitrous oxide to reduce pain during procedures. Black was also the first professor of pathology at the Chicago School of Dental Surgery and later became the first dean of Northwestern University's dental school. Soon after Black's death in 1918, the National Dental Association commissioned artist Frederick Cleveland Hibbard, a student of prominent sculptor Loreto Taft, to create a monument honoring Dr. Black. Hibbard created more than 70 works throughout the United States. His other Chicago efforts include the Carter Harrison Monument in Union Park, the Eagle Fountains in Grant Park, Wallach Fountain in Burnham Park, and Garden Figure in the Lincoln Park Conservatory. Funds for the monument were raised through the voluntary contributions of thousands of American dentists who were reportedly proud to have their profession recognized for the first time. Unveiled in August 1918 on the northeast corner of North Avenue and Clark Street near the Chicago Historical Society building, now called the Chicago History Museum, the unveiling ceremony was witnessed by more than 1,500 guests and members of the National Dental Association. The bronze statue, mounted on a limestone bench-like base, portrays Black seated with a book on his knee, embodying his legacy as a dedicated scientist, educator, and pioneer in dentistry. The G.V. Black sculpture was relocated just east of its original spot to North Astor Street and North Avenue in January of 1950 because of a very Chicago reason. The Chicago Transit Authority needed the space for a bus turnaround.
If you cut back through the green space, slightly northwest of the G.V. Black statue, you'll find the Fountain Girl sculpture. The Women's Christian Temperance Union commissioned the Fountain Girl sculpture for the Columbian World's Fair in 1893 to show alternatives to liquor during the fair. Designed by George Ward, the Fountain Girl at 4 1/2 feet was also known as the Little Cold Water Girl and the Frances Willard Fountain. Shown in a simple dress with bare feet and outstretched arms, the little girl holds a chalice that resembles the Loyal Temperance Union badge. Water trickles down from a bronze cup into a stone basin below. The fountain provided fresh water to people, horses, dogs, and birds during the celebration. When the World's Fair closed, the little girl was moved to the Loop at the Women's Temple at LaSalle and Monroe. When the Women's Temple was demolished, the Fountain Girl was moved in 1921 to Lakeshore Drive and North Avenue. It remained there until road reconstruction in the 1930s. Over the years, copies of Fountain Girl were also installed in Detroit, London, and Portland, Maine. In a still unsolved crime, the statue was stolen in 1958, leaving only the stone base. Authorities believed thieves likely made off with it for its valuable bronze. After more than a 60-year absence, a community-led effort resulted in a new bronze replica, cast from a mold of the identical statue in Portland, Maine, being installed on the original granite base in 2012 with a new plaza built around the monument. Fun fact, the London version was also stolen and later replaced using the Portland statue as a model. If you'd like to visit it, the Fountain Girl is located just behind the Chicago History Museum to the east for all to enjoy. Often, visitors will leave pumpkins for the little girl during autumn.
Just to the north of the Chicago History Museum, southwest of LaSalle and Clark, is a large one-story mausoleum with the name Couch at the top. So why is a mausoleum smack dab here among the museum grounds and the park? Before this area became a park, it was the site of Chicago's city cemetery. Concerns about burial practices and the effects of runoff from cholera victims getting into Chicago's drinking water supply necessitated the removal of tens of thousands of those buried at the city cemetery. Ira Couch and his brother James operated the city's first grand hotel, the Tremont, which made them both wealthy as the city grew. When Ira Couch died suddenly at the age of 50 during a winter stay in Cuba, his family had the one-story mausoleum built from a design by James M. Van Osdol, considered Chicago's first architect. The cost to build the 13-foot-high, 50-ton mausoleum was $7,000, roughly $260,000 in today's value. The tomb was never moved, likely because of its weight, the cost of such an undertaking, or due to a gentleman's agreement with the Lincoln Park District Board. The tomb, the oldest surviving structure in Lincoln Park, was restored in 1999 to honor the park's past.
Not far from the Couch tomb, on the southwest corner of LaSalle and Clark Streets, is the Chicago Fire Relic, a 7,000-pound mass of fused metal and masonry retrieved from the ruins of the 1871 Great Chicago Fire. When the Hall and Kimbark ironware store at State and Randolph burned, metals such as nails, washers, and hardware fused together with stone and brick due to the intense heat, reportedly more than 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This blob was discovered in 1890 while workers were excavating for the Masonic Temple. And after failed attempts to remove it, it was claimed by candy maker and collector Charles F. Gunther, who had lost his own shop in the fire. After Gunther's death, the relic joined the Chicago History Museum's collection. For decades, it sat hidden in shrubbery near the museum until being placed in a plaza as the first stop on the Richard M. and Shirley H. Jaffe History Trail, where it can be seen and touched today. The relic vividly symbolizes the devastation of the Great Fire and the resilience of Chicagoans, offering a tangible, almost sacred artifact of the city's rebirth.
A little more about the Richard M. and Shirley H. Jaffe History Trail. It is a 4.5-acre outdoor interpretive path that winds around the Chicago History Museum at the southwest corner of Lincoln Park. Open in 2024, the trail was developed in partnership with the Chicago Park District to create a vibrant educational destination and green space accessible to all. The trail features 8 thematic stops, each highlighting different aspects of Chicago's identity, such as Chicago is resilient, Chicago is complex, and Chicago is community. The Jaffe Trail is also a native species garden, showcasing a diversity of native plants and nearly 150 newly planted trees, which support local wildlife and pollinators. Signs along the way give visitors a much broader understanding of everything they'll experience along their walk.
Eli Bates, a successful lumberman of great character in Chicago, saw the statue of Admiral David Farragut built by sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens in Madison Square in New York City and decided he wanted to do something grand in Lincoln Park to honor President Lincoln. Without fanfare, Bates donated money for the statue's creation. Born in Dublin and raised in New York City, Augustus St. Gaudens attended the Art Academy, École des Beaux-Arts, in Paris, and studied sculpture in Italy. St. Gaudens reportedly saw Lincoln twice, once when he was 13 years old and during a hurried view of Lincoln on his deathbed in 1865. Only 30 years old when he received the commission, Gaudens used an actual casting of Lincoln's face and hands and asked a man of the same height to pose for the 11.5 foot tall bronze piece. The standing Lincoln statue was unveiled in October 1887 while a military band played My Old Kentucky Home. 10,000 people were present to watch the unveiling, including Abraham Lincoln's grandson, Abraham Lincoln II. Mary Todd Lincoln had lived on the near West Side after her husband's assassination. Sadly, Eli Bates, who donated the funds for the statue, did not live to see it placed in Lincoln Park, having died in 1881. Officially titled Abraham Lincoln the Man, the sculpture depicts Lincoln as mature and lanky, and he appears deep in thought as he stands by a broad classical chair. The sculpture sits east of the Chicago History Museum, just south of LaSalle Street at the north end of Dearborn. After major efforts to conserve the sculpture began in 1992, Standing Lincoln was designated a Chicago landmark in 2002.
Crossing LaSalle at Clark Street, you'll find a statue commemorating Robert Cavelier de LaSalle, the French explorer renowned for his role in exploring and claiming vast territories in North America for France during the 17th century. The monument honors de LaSalle's substantial legacy as an early pioneer in the Great Lakes and Mississippi River regions, foundational to the development of the Illinois country and ultimately the Midwest. The LaSalle statue was commissioned by Judge Lambert Tree, a pioneering Chicago jurist and philanthropist who, along with his wife Anne, played a vital role in fostering the local art scene in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Tree commissioned sculptor Count Jacques de Lalande, a Belgian artist, to create the statue of LaSalle, which was unveiled on October 12, 1889, with 1,500 Chicagoans in attendance. The statue shows LaSalle dressed in explorer's attire, holding a map and looking forward with determination and vision.
At Wisconsin and Clark Streets sits a 7-foot-long, 3-foot-wide, and 4-foot-high boulder made of Wisconsin granite, adorned with a plaque that represents the burial site of David Kinnison. When Kinnison arrived in Chicago in the 1840s, he was already considered an old man. Although he was a veteran of the War of 1812, he became a local celebrity by falsely claiming to be the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party and a veteran of the American Revolution. Based on his claims, he would have been 75 years old when he enlisted in the War of 1812, but inexplicably, Chicagoans in the mid-1800s believed his story. Though historians later established that Kinnison was approximately 85 years old when he died in 1852, area residents still convinced he was 115 years of age when he passed along with all of his other tall tales, paraded his coffin through the board-covered dirt streets, and buried him while a volley of musket fire echoed in the air. After all, locals thought this was owed to the last survivor of the Tea Party. 50 years later, 3 Revolutionary War groups collaborated to place a commemorative boulder in Lincoln Park at the presumed site of his grave. In 1935, the boulder was moved approximately 100 feet north and turned to face Clark Street as it originally faced south. Researcher Pamela Banos believes Kinnison was likely buried about 2 blocks south of the boulder spot.
He was a printer, inventor, philosopher, educator, and statesman whose contributions spanned diplomacy, science, civic leadership, and the shaping of American philosophy. As the only individual to sign the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, and the U.S. Constitution, he helped secure independence and systematize its governance. His civic vision of founding libraries, hospitals, and public institutions laid much of the groundwork for American society and government. And yet, Benjamin Franklin, much like many of the others we're discussing today, never came to Chicago. Franklin died in 1790, decades before Chicago became a city. So, how and why is there a Benjamin Franklin statue in Lincoln Park, just east of Stockton Drive and north of West LaSalle Drive? You might be wondering. It came about because of a newspaper man. In October 1895, Joseph Medill, editor of the Chicago Tribune, wrote a letter to the Lincoln Park commissioners that read, in part, "For some time I have felt that there should be placed in Lincoln Park a statue in bronze of Dr. Benjamin Franklin. He is undoubtedly one of the 3 or 4 greatest men our country has ever produced. His name and fame are worldwide. His works will be of everlasting benefit to his countrymen. He reflects luster on the American name. Holding him in this esteem, I have deemed it a personal duty to keep his memory fresh in the minds of Chicago's youth." The board quickly approved Medill's suggestion. With the support of the Old Time Printers Association, Medill hired sculptor Richard Henry Park to create the Benjamin Franklin Monument. Park is best known for his Actors Monument to Edgar Allan Poe of 1894, which debuted at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and for his 1892 Christopher Columbus Drake Fountain that until July 2020 could be seen at 92nd Street at South Chicago and Exchange Avenues on Chicago's South Side. Medill wanted, quote, "as faithful a reproduction of the features and form of this great American as the best talent can make." Park complied by creating a 9-foot 6-inch tall bronze standing figure of Franklin depicted in colonial-style breeches, waistcoat, and knee-length coat on a white granite pedestal. On Saturday, June 6, 1896, the Benjamin Franklin statue was unveiled at the west edge of Lakeshore Drive, opposite the High Bridge, in front of a crowd estimated to be more than 5,000, according to articles in the Chicago Chronicle newspaper. Coverage of the debut of the statue was quite thorough in Chicago newspapers. Medill's Tribune had a detailed account of the event, including a full column on page 1 with pages 2 and 3 dedicated solely to covering the minute-by-minute happenings, and a half-column wrap-up on page 4. The Benjamin Franklin Monument remained in its original spot until 1966, when the Chicago Park District moved the bronze sculpture and its white granite base to accommodate an expansion of the zoo. The existing location is the center of a circular lawn, the previous site of an early electric fountain.
The bronze statue of Ulysses S. Grant was installed in 1891 on a ridge overlooking Cannon Drive. It is the most prominent statue in Lincoln Park at 18 feet, 3 inches with a granite base of approximately 68 feet. The form is easily visible by motorists on DeSable Lakeshore Drive. Designed by Louis T. Robisso, the Grant statue is not far from the Lincoln statue, which is fitting considering their work together during the Civil War. Grant was the nation's first 4-star general, known for his military genius and battleground character. Republicans nominated him in 1868 for that year's presidential election, and without campaigning, Grant was elected president, a position he held from 1869 to 1877. He surveyed a Panama Canal route and a first-time border with Canada. Grant was the leader behind the 15th Amendment, so that all races would have the right to vote. He was also instrumental in destroying the original KKK organization. When Grant died in 1885 of throat cancer at the age of 63, Chicago businessman Potter Palmer began contributing funds to celebrate the great soldier's life. At the dedication ceremony, 20,000 people from all walks of life proceeded from the auditorium building to see the new Grant statue, where a group estimated to be greater than 250,000 were already waiting. Grant's widow viewed the beginning of the parade from Potter Palmer's mansion on Lakeshore Drive and then joined in the procession. Just offshore, boats of all descriptions, lake steamers of the Goodrich and Lehigh Valley lines, private yachts, and all government cutters tossed about on an unsettled lake as Grant was honored. In 1958, a military history organization recommended that the monument be moved to nearby Grant Park, but the park board denied this request after learning it would cost $230,000, or nearly $2.6 million in today's value, to complete the move. In the mid-1990s, the Chicago Park District fully conserved the monument, a process which included cleaning and treating both the sculpture and pedestal, as well as installing new lighting.
The Johann Christoph Friedrich von Schiller statue in Chicago's Lincoln Park honors the celebrated German playwright, poet, and philosopher Friedrich Schiller, who lived from 1759 to 1805, known for his works emphasizing freedom, ethics, and human dignity. The monument is a bronze replica of the original statue in Schiller's birthplace, Marbach, Germany, created by sculptor Ernst Billhauer Rau. Commissioned and funded by Chicago's vibrant German immigrant community in the 1880s, it symbolizes the cultural pride and heritage of these immigrants. In November of 1885, following a meeting at Chicago's Turner Hall, a cornerstone and foundation for the statue were laid in Lincoln Park. Sculptor William Pelargis from Stuttgart recast Rau's original work, while local craftsman John Gall carved the granite base. The statue was unveiled on May 18, 1886, in a ceremony attended by more than 2,000 guests, which featured speeches by Mayor Carter Harrison and Chicago German newspaper editor William Rapp. Those gathered included members of 60 German societies and lodges present to celebrate Schiller's legacy and American-German identity. The statue features Schiller in an introspective stance and remains at its original Lincoln Park site near North Stockton Drive and West Webster Avenue. It is considered one of the earliest examples of immigrant communities donating money for public art honoring important historical figures from their homeland.
America's first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, was a hero in battle, a fierce abolitionist, and a practicing lawyer. Hamilton wrote the Federalist Papers and defended and promoted the U.S. Constitution. Hamilton never once profited from his work in politics, nor did he take outside income while he was in office. When he left office, his only assets were his household furniture. In 1968, Kate Sturgis Buckingham gave a $1 million gift to design, sculpt, and provide maintenance for a new Alexander Hamilton statue. It was supposed to be in Grant Park, between Buckingham Fountain and the Art Institute. It would have been the second statue in Grant Park. The 13-foot-tall bronze statue was completed in 1941 by John Angel, an English-born sculptor. The project was delayed because of the war and other controversies with Grant Park commissioners. It was meant to be a simple monument, but ballooned into an elaborate structure. In July 1952, the statue was finally unveiled in Lincoln Park at Stockton and Diversey, with 1,500 onlookers and 3 descendants of the Hamilton family, including Hamilton's grandson, Brigadier General Pierpont Morgan Hamilton. When the statue was originally installed, it stood atop a massive 78-foot tall black granite plinth designed by architect Samuel Marks, with its original orientation facing north. In 1993, the granite plinth was demolished due to structural flaws. The statue was then reinstalled on a much lower red granite base, and at that time was turned to face south. The reason for this change was to allow the statue to be seen in better light and to offer a more prominent view to people approaching from the south. Of course, this meant that most passers-by would see Hamilton from behind, which is how it remained for 23 years. After a conservation and regilding project in 2016, the Chicago Park District reinstalled the statue and returned it to its original north-facing orientation. Today, the statue once again looks north as it did when first dedicated.
Danish author Hans Christian Andersen wrote 150 tales depicting children in new and different ways by giving them a voice, allowing them to speak their minds and express themselves. He wrote the beloved fairy tales The Emperor's New Clothes, The Ugly Duckling, and The Little Mermaid. The 8-foot-tall Hans Christian Andersen statue east of North Stockton Drive and south of West Dickens Avenue was designed by Johan Gellert, an American citizen of Danish descent, also known for designing the controversial Haymarket Riot Policeman Monument. It is installed on a pedestal of Minnesota granite and was funded primarily by members of Chicago's Dania Society, a Danish-American group seeking to celebrate their heritage in their new home. Additional funds were raised by children nationwide, donating pennies and nickels. Andersen is depicted seated on a tree stump with a book in his lap and a swan at his feet, in allusion to his famous story, The Ugly Duckling. Unfortunately, it was not finished in time for the 1893 World's Fair. The statue was unveiled in 1896 to a crowd of 10,000. Children from nearby schools attended the celebration, and they closed the event with America.
Another monument in Lincoln Park dedicated to a writer is the Eugene Field Memorial, often called the Dream Lady. Born in St. Louis in 1850, Eugene Field was a writer and newspaper editor in several Midwestern cities before moving to Chicago in 1883, where he began writing a humor column called Sharps and Flats for the Chicago Daily News. In addition to his newspaper columns, Field also wrote poetry and short stories. At the time of his death in 1895, he was considered the Children's Poet Laureate of America. After Field's death, local newspaper editors led a decades-long fundraising effort, bolstered by thousands of small donations from children across America and a major grant from the B.F. Ferguson Fund of the Art Institute of Chicago to create a fitting tribute. Renowned sculptor Edward McCartan was commissioned for the memorial, which was completed and dedicated in 1922. The memorial features a lyrical bronze group atop a rectangular granite base. The Dream Lady hovers protectively, scattering poppies over 2 serenely sleeping children, evoking the dreamscape of Field's poetry. Relief sculptures carved on the base illustrate scenes and verses from his poems, specifically Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod, the sugar plum tree, the flyaway horse, and seeing things. The monument includes inscriptions of verses such as, have you ever heard of the sugar plum tree? 'Tis a marvel of great renown. It blooms on the shore of the Lollipop Sea in the garden of Shut-Eye Town. Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe, sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. The Eugene Field Memorial is located northeast of the Helen Brock Primate House at the Lincoln Park Zoo.
Here's the story of a statue that isn't a statue. Let me explain. Giuseppe Garibaldi was an Italian military hero and a unifying figure for Italy who died in 1882. In 1901, the Italian-American group known as the Legion Garibaldi raised $12,000, that's more than $450,000 in 2025 value, for the creation of a public monument to Garibaldi. Sculpted by New York artist Victor Gherardi, the bronze statue depicted Garibaldi standing with folded arms and a cape over his shoulders, capturing his stern, resolute character. The statue was first installed on the east side of Lincoln Park near Old Lakeshore Drive, now Cannon Drive. The base was engraved in Italian with, "He fought wars for freedom, not for conquest." The statue's unveiling occurred on Columbus Day, October 12, 1901, in a rain-soaked but festive ceremony attended by about 2,000 people. A parade from downtown Chicago to Lincoln Park signaled the pride and unity of Chicago's Italian-American community. Dignitaries, patriotic music, and speeches commemorated Garibaldi's ideals of liberty and national unification. Over the next century, the Garibaldi statue was relocated multiple times within Lincoln Park. Its second and third sites remained within the park as the city redesigned park roads and layouts. The third location, just southwest of the South Pond, became the site for annual Garibaldi birthday celebrations for more than 40 years, starting in the 1930s. In the 1970s, leaders in Chicago's Italian-American community advocated moving the monument from Lincoln Park to the heart of Little Italy, believing it would receive more recognition and context among the Italians in the area. In 1979, McLaren Park on the near west side, center of Chicago's Little Italy, was renamed Garibaldi Park, and in 1982, the bronze Garibaldi monument was moved to the park bearing his name and placed on a new granite pedestal. Now, if you're thinking a new pedestal, what happened to the old pedestal? The original 63-ton stone base inscribed with Garibaldi's name and motto remains empty in Lincoln Park to this day, an odd sight, to be sure.
At least with the Garibaldi statue, it was relocated and can still be enjoyed by Chicago residents and visitors. This next one, not so much. On June 19, 1897, 1,000 people gathered at 4 p.m. in Lincoln Park to see the unveiling of the statue of famed German composer Ludwig van Beethoven. In stands erected nearby was the statue's donor, Professor Carl Wolfson, and others who listened as the German Monochor sang Richard Strauss' Die Nacht, or The Night. Johannes Gellert, the Danish sculptor who also created the Hans Christian Andersen statue in Lincoln Park, created the 3-foot-high bronze bust using a death mask of Beethoven. The bust was mounted on a 5-foot pedestal of Bedford raindrop stone and placed not far from the Schiller piece. There it remained until 1970. I found a piece in a January 1970 issue of the Chicago Tribune that mentioned funds that have been approved to replace the pedestal for the Beethoven statue, which was crumbling. The statue was removed so that a stone cutting firm in Frankfort, Illinois, could craft a new pedestal out of pink buff stone, and that the statue would again be on display by the end of April of that year. According to what little we can find on the subject, at some point during 1970 or possibly 1973, the statue was stolen, likely for its bronze, never recovered, and never replaced. Well, not with a Beethoven bust. In 1987, the space formerly occupied by the Beethoven bust was used for a bust of Sir George Solti, a world-renowned orchestra conductor who brought new life to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in the 1960s. A group of donors raised approximately $30,000 to commission British artist Dame Elizabeth Frank to produce the bust of the legendary and at the time still living conductor. After being briefly displayed at London's Royal Opera House, the bronze bust was installed in front of the Lincoln Park Conservatory on the maestro's 75th birthday in 1987. In 2006, the bust of Sir George Solti, who died in 1997, was relocated to the newly designed Solti Garden in Grant Park and placed on a new dark granite base.
At the northeast corner of Cannon and Fullerton is a slender, subtly curving stainless steel hollow column that rises nearly 40 feet. In the late 1970s, the Friends of the Parks sought to install new public art in Lincoln Park. According to an article in the Chicago Tribune in 1979, Ellsworth Kelly, a painter and sculptor who had learned metalworking techniques as an Army engineer in World War II, was selected to create a new outdoor modern sculpture in the area. Funding was provided by the National Endowment for the Arts grant and major fundraising. Mr. Ellsworth did not accept payment for this sculpture. Ellsworth Kelly later explained that he intended his minimalist work to be easily appreciated by passers-by, joggers, cyclists, and drivers without requiring them to stop and study it. The piece, the first large sculpture in Lincoln Park since 1952, is officially titled Curve 22, but is widely known as I Will, representing the can-do spirit that Chicagoans showed after the Great Fire of 1871. Dedicated in November 1981 with Mayor Jane Byrne presiding, the obelisk-type structure is located just east of where many believe the 1871 fire stopped burning. Other works by Kelly are currently on display at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Just east of Lakeshore Drive at Fullerton is the Theater on the Lake, a performance venue and restaurant that was built in the early 1920s as a Chicago Daily News fresh air sanitarium for sick babies. A year after the fresh air sanitarium opened, the Chicago Daily News held a competition open only to students and alumni of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago to design a sculpture to be placed outside the doors of the building. The winning design was created by Decatur, Illinois-born Ida McClellan Stout, who was awarded $1,000, a little more than $19,000 in 2025 money, plus another $1,000 for the construction budget. Called Charitas, Stout's design depicted a woman holding two children and was cast in bronze, resting at the end of a 30-foot wide circular reflecting basin that also served as a wading pool. While that structure was later put in storage in 1939, then later taken out of storage, then moved around to various park sites around Chicago and even painted white, it was restored in the late 1990s to its original brown patina, and in early 2016, after the completion of a new landfill extension east of Fullerton Avenue, Charitas was reinstalled with its original base in Lincoln Park. We should point out that the entire stretch of land on which the theater on the lake sits is all man-made. Originally called Picnic Island, it was renamed Simmons Island to honor Francis T. Simmons, who had served on the Lincoln Park Board for 15 years and was president for 12. As Simmons was a big part of the area's development, when he died, the Lincoln Park Board passed resolutions honoring his memory by renaming the man-made island in his honor.
If you continue north of the theater on the lake building, just west of the walking path is a large stone with a plaque dedicated to Francis T. Simmons. Although a little tough to find as it is hidden by trees, it is probably the only thing on the man-made land that acts as a reminder of Francis T. Simmons' efforts on behalf of Lincoln Park. The plaque was restored in 1999 through a generous contribution by the Elizabeth Morse Charitable Trust.
Continuing north on the island, you'll find numerous white heads peeking from the ground. Part of the 10,000 Ripples, or TTR, art exhibit. 10,000 Ripples is a community-driven public art and civic engagement project created by artist Indira Freitas Johnson in partnership with the nonprofit group Changing Worlds. Central to the project are 100 fiberglass Buddha head sculptures, each weighing about 300 pounds, symbolizing peace, tolerance, and nonviolence. The ones in Lincoln Park are just a few of many you may see in public plazas, alleys, libraries, building lobbies, and even abandoned lots in various neighborhoods around Chicago.
One more creation of note on the island between Fullerton and Diversey, the Emanuel Swedenborg Monument, which honors the 17th century Swedish scientist, philosopher, and theologian whose visionary writings influenced generations, including Emerson and Burnham. Chicago's Church of the New Jerusalem, led by Dr. Minnie Ridgway Bishop and her husband, donated the bust, sculpted by Adolph Johnson, to the city. According to the Chicago Park District website, Johnson spent 5 years creating the sculpture, relying on studies of Swedenborg's skull by Professor W. Holzerantz in Uppsala, a portrait in the castle of Gripsholm, as well as a painting in the Nordiska Museum in Stockholm. The Swedenborg statue was unveiled on June 28, 1924, in a grand ceremony with speeches by dignitaries such as Axel Wallenberg, cool name, Sweden's envoy to the U.S. who traveled to Chicago from Washington for the ceremony. A letter from President Calvin Coolidge was read, as was the poem Swedenborg by Edwin Markham. 1,200 Swedish singers from all parts of the country sang songs of their fatherland in front of a crowd estimated to be 20,000. The bust was engraved with a quote from President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1938. In 1976, the original bronze was stolen and replaced for decades by a small pyramid, thanks to international collaboration and the recovery of the original plaster model. A newly cast bronze bust was installed on the original granite pedestal in April 2012, restoring Chicago's tribute to Swedenborg's enduring legacy.
German-born John Peter Altgeld spent his career as a lawyer and judge before turning to politics, becoming the first foreign-born governor of Illinois, serving from 1893 to 1897. Known for his progressive reforms, Altgeld champions workers' rights, workplace safety, and child labor laws, and notably pardoned 3 men convicted in the 1886 Haymarket bombing, citing lack of evidence and rush to judgment, resulting in widespread public backlash. He was not reelected and died in 1902. Over the following decade, reassessments of Altgeld's life and contribution swayed public sentiment toward Altgeld. And in 1913, the Illinois Senate appropriated $25,000 for a monument to Altgeld. After a competitive design process where between 30 and 40 submissions were considered, the project was awarded to sculptor Gutzon Borglum, famous for his later work on Mount Rushmore. The monument features a bronze statue of Altgeld standing over and shielding a crouching man, woman, and child, meant to symbolize his protection of the working class. Even before it was unveiled on Labor Day in 1915, the design was met with derision by the city's art commission, claiming Altgeld looked too small and those he is supposed to be protecting look servile. Famously corrupt Chicago Mayor Big Bill Thompson, discussed in other episodes of this podcast, settled the issue by disbanding the art commission, saying the statue looks good to me and the committee doesn't. The Altgeld statue can be seen near Diversey Parkway and Cannon Drive.
Slightly north and west of the Altgeld statue is one for writer and philosopher Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Commissioned by Chicago's German-American community through the Goethe Monument Association in the late 1800s, the statue was originally planned to stand opposite the nearby Schiller Monument. In 1910, a competition was held in which 9 sculptors submitted proposals to a Berlin-based jury, with models later exhibited at the Art Institute of Chicago. Munich professor Hermann Hahn won with his unique design. Rather than creating a literal portrait, the committee specifically requested a sculpture embodying the spirit of Goethe, allowing artists free flight to their imagination. Hahn's 18-foot-tall, 80-ton bronze sculpture depicts a heroic Zeus-like figure holding an eagle on his knee, symbolizing Goethe's Olympian achievements. A low wall behind features a bas-relief portrait of Goethe and quotes from his masterwork Faust in both German and English. The inscription reads, "To Goethe, the mastermind of the German people, the Germans of Chicago, 1913." The monument to Goethe was unveiled on June 13, 1914, just 1 month before World War I began. That statue faced immediate criticism from Chicago newspapers and was mocked for weeks after installation. During World War I, anti-German sentiment grew intense, and in 1918, the monument was vandalized with yellow paint, with area residents threatening its destruction. However, the Lincoln Park commissioners allowed it to remain. I should mention that in 1900, about 470,000 Chicagoans, that's roughly 25% of the city's population at the time, had either been born in Germany or had a parent born there. Some sources suggest that when including all people of German descent, not just first and second generation, the percentage reached as high as 1/3 of the city's population, making Chicago the 6th largest German city in the world by 1914. In June of 1951, Goethe's birthplace, home in Frankfurt, Germany, was rebuilt after being destroyed by American bombs during World War II. Just 3 months later, Goethe's statue in Lincoln Park was damaged when lightning struck the left foot, requiring the Chicago Park District to recast and reattach the lower leg.
On the east side of Belden, between Lincoln Park West and Stockton, is the William Shakespeare statue, a gift from Chicago businessman Samuel Johnson, who passed away in 1886 and left a reported $10,000, nearly $350,000 in 2025 value, in his will for the memorial. Chosen to sculpt the statue was William O'Day Partridge, who had a unique challenge. As only 2 portraits of Shakespeare had been done before his death in 1616, Partridge had little with which to work. So he dedicated 3 years to studying Shakespeare's life, Elizabethan customs, and 4 death masks to capture Shakespeare's spirit. Partridge also consulted Shakespearean actors and traveled to Stratford and London to ensure authenticity. The Shakespeare statue was unveiled on April 23, 1894, which is believed to be the anniversary of both Shakespeare's birth and death. The bronze statue depicts a contemplative Shakespeare seated comfortably in a rich cloak, holding a book, and gazing thoughtfully. The statue was intentionally placed on a low pedestal, allowing close access to visitors. At the dedication ceremony, Partridge stated, "Shakespeare needs nothing of bronze. His monument is England, America, and the whole of Saxondom. He placed us upon a pedestal, but one cannot place him on one, for he belongs among the people whom he so dearly loved." The statue quickly became beloved by Chicagoans, especially children who often climbed onto the pedestal to sit with Shakespeare, making the monument approachable and interactive. Over time, small celebrations for Shakespeare's birthday continued at the site. The statue is recognized for its expressive character and dynamic composition, remaining a treasured Chicago landmark, symbolizing cultural appreciation, literary heritage, and the city's connection to one of the greatest figures in English literature.
The history of the Eli Bates Fountain dates to the 1880s. Eli Bates, a wealthy Chicago lumber merchant and partner in Mears and Bates Company, bequeathed $40,000 in his will to create 2 sculptures for Lincoln Park, the famous standing Lincoln statue and this decorative fountain. Completed in 1887, the fountain was a collaborative masterpiece between internationally acclaimed artist Augustus St. Gaudens and his assistant Frederick William McManus. St. Gaudens, fresh from his success with the Admiral Farragut Monument in New York's Madison Square, hired McManus initially as an errand boy in 1880, then promoted him to studio assistant. When McManus later studied at Paris's École des Beaux-Arts and won the prestigious Prix des Ateliers in 1886, St. Gaudens brought him back to collaborate on this fountain project. The whimsical bronze fountain, also known as Storks at Play, features a circular granite basin designed by the renowned architecture firm McKim, Mead & White. The sculptural elements include 2 bronze storks, maybe they're herons, with outstretched wings spouting water from their beaks, 3 half-boy, half-fish creatures, each wrestling with large fish, and tall bronze reeds and cattails at the center. The Henry Boddard Bronze Company of New York cast the bronze figures, while Mitchell Granite Company provided the stone, and J.L. Mott Ironworks created the water nozzles. St. Gaudens and architect Stanford White personally traveled to Chicago in spring of 1887 to oversee the installation of the bronze elements. The fountain serves as the centerpiece of Lincoln Park's formal garden, one of Chicago's oldest existing gardens dating to the 1880s, located just south of the Victorian-style Lincoln Park Conservatory. Over the years, some original elements went missing, but a major conservation effort by the Lincoln Park Conservancy in 1999 restored the fountain, including recreating the missing cattail sculptures. The project was made possible through funding from Adopt-A-Monument donor Borg Warner Corporation. This collaboration marked an important step in McMoney's career. He would later create the central fountain for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, known as the Grand Barge of State. The Eli Bates Fountain remains a beloved attraction for children and adults alike, embodying the playful spirit and artistic excellence of late 19th century American sculpture. Listening to today's episode about Lincoln Park's statues, sculptures, and oddities. Special thanks to my guest, author Connie Fairbanks, for sharing her knowledge and appreciation of Chicago's parks. There are links in the show's notes with items you may find interesting for yourself or as a gift. Anything you order through those links, not just the items listed, may help support the podcast at no additional cost to you. If you have any questions, anything to add, or just want to say hi, feel free to go to chicagohistorypod.com and click on the microphone in the lower right corner to leave me a voice message. Your message may be played on a future episode. The art for today's episode and most of the other episodes is courtesy of John K. Schneider. Thank you, Johnny. If you have art needs or any creative work you need done, reach out to him at angeleyesartjks@gmail.com. I will be back soon with more stories from Chicago's history. Until then, get out and explore when possible. Learn more about whatever city you live in, and stay safe.